Nobody was talking about him 5 days ago.
Yeah.
And now everybody's talking about him, which I think is funny. I think it's, when Ben Shapiro's on there saying the election was proof, we don't want commercials like that. That might be a little bit of a stretch. But dude, everybody's talking about this, which is wild. And now, Escaping the Drift, the show designed to get you from where you are to where you want to be. I'm John Gafford, and I have a knack for getting extraordinary achievers to drop their secrets to help you on a path to greatness. So stop drifting along, escape the drift, and it's time to start right now. Back again for another episode of The Quiet Storm. No, it's not The Quiet Storm. It's the podcast that gets you from where you are to where you want to be. It's Escaping the Drift, and today, people in the studio. Again, awesome when you have a big event here in town. One of the advantages of living in Vegas is I can get these big speakers, man, that go to these big events and they come in here. So drop knowledge on you for like an hour. And in studio today, we got a cat. Kind of a big deal, I'll say. He is the host of the Success Factory podcast, has a massive newsletter, massive online following, has done incredible things in the world of business, from having large exits to continuing to be an investor of things. And this is a dude that definitely has some tips that's going to get you from where you are to where you want to be. Ladies and gents, welcome to the studio. This is Scott Clary.
What's going on? How's it going,
up,
John?
Dude, how are you, man?
Yeah, Vegas is a fun city to live in because then you get everybody coming through for events. That's smart.
Easy city to live in.
That's why I moved to Miami.
Is it? Yeah. See, I was going to move to Tacoma, Washington. No, I'm kidding.
I would say you're not going to get many people going through Tacoma, Washington.
Yeah, that's a joke. I wasn't really going to do that. But no, so you're in town this weekend speaking at Todd Alt's event, RiskOn 360. By the time you hear this, it will have gone, but you can hopefully check it out next year. And what capacity are you speaking for Todd? Like, what are you talking about?
So we're talking about, I'm doing a panel with my better half, Gina. Sean Kelly's on that panel. He's a mutual friend too. Mm-hmm. We're speaking about content, influencer marketing, building a personal brand, sort of the playbook that we've deployed because I have a good following. I have a good podcast, good newsletter, like you mentioned. My better half, she built a company called My Therapist Says. So different demo than me, but they have about 8.2 million on their main account.
Whoa.
And they've been doing this for 11 years and they create memes. So she's going to talk about sort of her structure and framework for creating culturally relevant viral content. And then Sean built a massive podcast too.
Yeah. It's funny. Sean, we talked about this before we came on. Sean's podcast, if you haven't checked it out, Digital Social Hour, great. And Sean's just a machine. Like the dude, I talked to him the other night and he did 23 podcasts in one day.
I don't understand it.
I was just look, I mean, it's hard enough for me to be interested in anything for longer than like an hour. And so it's like, I don't get how he does it.
I wouldn't recommend if you're getting into the game of creating content, I wouldn't look at Sean as this is what I have to do to start.
Yeah.
Because you're going to, first of all, for content creators, what Sean does is already fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like nobody does it at that level with that many shows. And I think that if you're just getting started, I mean, that's not a good avatar to look up to. I think that you want to just start with something that's going to, not burn you out in the first month. Yeah. So, props to Sean for doing that. I love his work ethic and his hustle, but that's not reality for most creators. Most creators should figure out a process that they can do repeatedly for the next 10 years. And keep in mind too, like Sean's main thing is his podcast. My main thing is my podcast too. And I do 3 episodes a week.
You do 3 drops a week.
Yeah.
Are they all guest drops?
No, okay. Sometimes they are, but I do for sure 2 guest drops, and then sometimes I'll do a solo. And I think this is also a good lesson in terms of like content creation. Like I always test new things. So yeah, sure, guest drops are great and interviews are a lot of fun, and I love them probably for the same reason you love them.
Yeah.
But I'll also test sort of like 10 to 15 minute, pick a topic that I know is going to resonate, and I have a process for testing which topics resonate with my audience. And then do like a 10 to 15 minute or even like a 30-minute solo episode on that. I've also done solo episodes on founder stories. So, I mean, I've done episodes on like Bernard Arnault from LVMH and shit like that.
I saw one of your founder stories. Yeah. I saw, now that I think about it, I saw you did one.
But I keep testing them, and then I'm looking at listener retention, and I'm looking at how many people like that versus an interview. So yeah, you just keep testing.
Dude, I love that. I love that founder series you did. I saw one of these. Now that you say that, I saw one because, like, to me, the greatest media thing that's been created in the last 20 years was the series that the History Channel did, The Men That Built America.
Yeah.
It's fucking great. If you haven't seen that, dude, stop watching this right now and go watch that. Because that is like, it's a jaw-dropping America, like how you,
because you go into the history of it.
It's crazy.
And also I found that, listen, when you do like when you do an interview, there's an art to an interview and there's an art to pulling out lessons and wisdom from somebody. But when you can do like an insane amount of research ahead of time on pick a big historical figure and really like go into the weeds of what they did, there's going to be a level of granularity there that you just can't get in an hour-long interview with somebody who's, not Sam Walton or Bernard Arnault.
No, because, it's funny because our drops here, we do a guest a week. So I'll do the guest comes out on Tuesday, and on Thursday we do the weekly drop is what it's called. It's like a sub podcast of this, which is exactly that. It's me. It's me 10 or 15 minutes. And normally what it winds up being is through the course of doing this interview today, you and I are going to hit on some sort of a subject at some point.
We'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, that I'm going to think eventually. What the fuck we're talking about? But we're going to hit a subject that I think deserves a little bit more delving into. Yeah. Or something will happen in the media cycle this week. Like I got to tell you, and we'll talk about this because I love this, and this will probably be irrelevant because the media cycle is so fast by the time it comes up. But I'll probably use these clips ahead of time. I'm definitely talking about the Jaguar thing this week, but not for the reason you think. Not for the reason you think. I think it's fucking brilliant. Everybody's hating on it. And because you're going to appreciate this because you love to go granular with founders, right? If you just, as soon as I saw it, it reminded me of something instantly. How old are you?
34.
34. You're not going to remember this.
Tell me what it is.
In 1985, Coca-Cola had a genius idea. They were doing taste tests all around the United States. Coca-Cola was. And they were losing taste test to Pepsi. So they said, okay. And Pepsi was advertising this like crazy that like all these blind taste tests, people were choosing Pepsi. They were choosing Pepsi. They were choosing Pepsi.
But they were being put on by Coca-Cola.
No. Oh. Pepsi was doing this.
Okay.
So Coca-Cola comes out and says, here's what we're doing. We're coming out with new Coke. We're changing our formulation for the first time in 100 years or whatever it was. We're going to add more. Well, probably guess they took the cocaine out at some point. But
I think that was before 1985.
Before 85. Well, the 80s were a wild time. I don't know what to tell you. But since they took the cocaine out at some point earlier than that. But they were going to add more sugar to it, right? So they added more sugar. And then they came out with new Coke. And everybody hated it. They fucking hated it, but everybody was talking about it. And then after about 6 months of this disaster of new Coke, they formulated and came back out with Coke Classic.
Yeah.
So now you could get the old stuff again. And dude, the sales went through the roof. So think about it. Before 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, whenever it was, and this disaster ad came out, who was talking about Jaguar? No one. Who's talking about him now?
Everyone.
Yeah. So now you have this opportunity for Jaguar to ride this disaster because they say it doesn't matter if you're talking good or talking bad, is when they stop talking, you got a problem. And they had stopped talking about Jaguar.
But they got to find a way to capitalize on it or else what's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of buzz and people aren't going to convert.
But I think you're going to start seeing now if I'm Jaguar, what I do is I take this disaster of a campaign and this new thing and I start bringing back the classic stuff. I think within a year, you're going to start to see, let's go back to the XK. Let's bring out a new XK to celebrate our heritage. That would
be smart.
It'd be super smart. And when it happens, I don't know this is happening. Maybe they're just idiots.
But you know what you got to do, by the way?
What's that?
When you do a podcast and you talk about like the future, you have to be like you have to just have these like super prolific ideas and thoughts and you say them with 100% certainty.
And then it comes back.
And then you can clip it in a year from now.
Yeah.
But then all the shit that you say that doesn't work, you just
delete.
Ignore it.
Okay, so here we are.
Gary Vee does this all the time.
For sure, 100% of the time.
I respect Gary Vee a lot, but he says a lot of shit, and then he'll clip the stuff that went right.
It's like one of those gambling hotlines back in the day where you would pay like $100 and you would call, and half the callers would get this game, and then half the callers would get the other way. And then, so 50% of the time you're always right, and then you just keep working.
You look like a fucking genius, dude.
Yeah, that was the hustle. So yeah, but anyway, so that's what's going to happen is you're going to see Jaguar use this negative press. They're going to revert back to the classic Jaguar everything, and they're going to be sort of relevant again. That's what I would do because they had to do something.
Right now, everyone hates them.
Fuck, it was stupid.
And Porsche is they just put out an ad not calling out Jaguar, but saying like if we were, I think it was, was it Dua Lipa? It was with one big celebrity, but basically you're saying like, if I was going to direct a Porsche commercial, this is what I would do. And that's the commercial. It's her just basically reinforcing all the Porsche values. Like that's what they're doing in the commercial, and basically taking like a subtle stab at like, don't fuck with a good thing. Don't fuck with a classic. If they do that, what you're talking about, it'd be smart though.
Nobody was talking about him 5 days ago.
Yeah.
And now everybody's talking about him, which I think is funny. I think it's, when Ben Shapiro's on there saying the election was proof we don't want commercials like that, that might be a little bit of a stretch. But dude, everybody's talking about this, which is wild. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how long it dominates the news cycle. Because I mean, nothing dominates the news cycle very long.
It'll be forgotten soon. Yeah, I think. But I mean, it's more impressions and it's more eyeballs than they've gotten, again, like you mentioned, in the past 10 years.
Well, let's back up, dude, because obviously, I like to get the origin story on everybody that's highly successful that comes through here. Because I like to know, it's a science experiment. Is it nature? Is it nurture? What happened to you? So tell me about early you, dude. Like give me the early you.
The early me grew up in a family of like sort of comfort and predictability. My dad worked for the government in Canada. I worked for CSIS, so he was doing counterterrorism and intelligence, which is a very cool job. But I mean, it was still a 9-to-5 government job. So entrepreneurship, working with, tech, startup, that wasn't really where I came from. But I think that, so your podcast is called Escaping the Drift. I think that you're obviously very entrepreneurial, but there's a lot of people that were, parents and grandparents that found a lot of comfort in a 9-to-5 W-2. And I think that our generation is realizing very quickly, and as did I, that W-2s are not going to be the way that we're going to really secure our freedom, and we're not going to be able to retire, and we're not going to be able to live like the life that we really want to live. And this sounds a little bit like a talk track that you hear quite a bit, but if you actually think about what our parents and grandparents went through, and the pensions that they were receiving, and the comfort and the security that they had from their jobs, I don't think many people can get that kind of comfort and security anymore. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, you don't see big pensions being flown around.
No, exactly. Well,
outside of government employees, and who knows how long that's going to last now with the new dose.
So early age, I was like, shit, how much money do I have to have in a bucket? And now my views of retirement have changed. But early stage was like, how much money do I have to have in a bucket if I want to retire at 65? Because I'm not going to be getting a pension from wherever I'm working. And it was a lot of money. You start to do the math and you're like, well, if I'm only making X amount of dollars working in 95 in this company, that's really not going to get that bucket of money that I really want to live a good life until I die at 100, 120, God willing, right? Mm-hmm. So it was really a very logical decision to move away from traditional 9-to-5 as quickly as possible. I started working in tech. One of the companies I was working at was acquired. That sort of opened my eyes to acquisition and private equity, because it was a good exit. The guy made a lot of money. The founder made a lot of money. And then it was a light bulb moment. I need to find a way to get a piece of a company or to build something that can eventually be acquired. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of the rabbit hole that I went down. And then since then, I've worked in a variety of different startups. One was acquired 5 years ago. It was a broadcast software startup. It was acquired by Grass Valley. I've done the fractional CRO stuff. I've worked full-time as co-founder CRO. So I've just stuck around the startup universe, and that sort of led me into what my content is right now, which mm-hmm. is speaking to entrepreneurs, talking to entrepreneurs, anything that is about entrepreneurship, building from zero. That stuff really interests me mm-hmm. because I think that is people's path to freedom. It's finding a way to build something from scratch, build something that you own. And I think that that's something that everybody should, at least, if it's not something they jump into head first, which I don't think is smart, they should at least start to understand that, to future-proof themselves from being laid off, from not having a pension, from understanding that companies don't really give a shit about you at the end of the day. So I sort of just champion entrepreneurship as much as possible.
No, I agree. I think my views of the W-2 employee and all of that stuff are very similar, though, to my views on college, right? I don't give this blanket like this is a bad thing. I don't give it a blanket. Like people say, oh, all the college is stupid, guys. College is a scam, all that stuff. I don't subscribe to that.
No, I don't either.
Because I genuinely believe that number one, college is a scam if you go get a liberal arts degree in indigenous people studies on the impact it has on theater. I mean, okay, yeah, you're an idiot. You got scammed. You're going to be a barista.
Yeah.
I get that. You go to school for a finance or accounting degree. You're learning the language of business. There's something to that. You go get a law degree. There's something to that. You become a doctor. There's something to that. It depends on what you get there. But more than that, I think it's a great place to teach you how to grow up. It's where you learn to be an adult.
Yeah.
If anything else, it's where you really learn to be an adult. And I think it's so funny because I was talking the other day about this, where I went to an event in Orange County, and it was a bunch of pro athletes and a bunch of money managers and private office people. And Eric Red was up there, who was a professional basketball player, and he was with Meta World Peace, and they were doing a panel. And he said, how many of you guys are getting ready to retire from whatever league you're in, or you think you're going to be out of your league soon? Because there was a bunch of athletes there and a bunch of hands went up. And he's like, the first thing you need to get is a fucking shrink. He's like, because from the day that somebody first told you you were special at whatever you do sports wise, you stop growing as a person. So if that was 13, you're 13 right now with millions of dollars, which is why you're all going to be fucking broke. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing that a little bit in the new economy, the modern economy, the crypto, slot machine that is running all the time.
But none of that shit is entrepreneurship in my mind. Like, I mean, like there's like bullshit entrepreneurship. Yeah, it's
gambling.
Yeah, it's gambling. But then there's like real, like, okay, so you went to college, you went to university, you got your degree.
Yeah.
Smart. Now you've grown up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And now you go into because keep in mind, we can't assume that everybody just jumps into building their own thing or jumps into startup land right away, because it's not what the majority of people do. The majority of people go out after college and get a job.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, great. Now figure out how to future-proof yourself so that not only does your earning power increase exponentially if you find a way to productize your skill set, or you build something that is of value to the world and you take that to market at some point in your career. I'm saying that eventually the thing that you're doing right now, there will be a ceiling on it, or you'll be made redundant.
Yes.
And that's all I'm saying. So I don't think that.
I think the point that I'm trying to make is, if you're going into a job looking at it to take care of you for the rest of your life, probably not. But you need to look at that as a continuation of your education.
Correct.
What is this company doing right that I can learn, that I can apply to something else?
And I fast forwarded through my entire sort of origin story, but there was like about how many years? 10-ish years of like working for companies.
Yeah. Before
then starting to figure out how to do my own thing. And like, even like the podcast I create now and the newsletter and how I monetize that's a business in and of itself, right? That is a full business that I've started from scratch. So I think that the goal is, and there's a strategy behind why I started the podcast as opposed to starting just a business. I wanted to build a media asset that I could launch businesses against in the future once you have the audience. But yes, I think, and there's other versions of entrepreneurship. You could be working a 9-to-5 and then find a way to take the skill set that you've learned in your 9-to-5 and then do it freelance or side hustle. So you have your 9-to-5 and then you take on clients 5 to 9, and all of a sudden you have so many clients that you can now turn yourself into an agency or some sort of service provider doing that thing that you're actually doing in your 9-to-5 as a full-time entrepreneur.
I agree with you. I think the difference is people all get lumped into entrepreneur. Saying you're an entrepreneur is the new I'm a rock star.
Which is
it is,
yes,
right.
Agreed.
But these guys that are running the shit coin, the meme coin casinos.
Yeah.
My differential, my line is, if you're not creating something, if you're playing a zero-sum game where the only way for you to win is somebody else to lose, which all of that is, you can't rake hard in crypto unless somebody loses. That's not entrepreneurship. That's speculating.
Yeah.
That's pure. You're gambling at that point. You're not building anything.
Yeah.
Which I get. And I think that, having those jobs to learn how to build something is effective. But I also think that people make the mistake of thinking that, I love when people are like, oh, I want an entrepreneurship. I want my own company so I can make my own hours.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
Good fucking luck.
Okay. Yeah.
I've never worked more.
Yeah.
I've never worked more than when you build your own thing.
You won't.
So I think that you should define what entrepreneurship is and what it isn't. It's not just extracting value from the world. It's giving as much value as possible. I think that a great version of entrepreneurship is to take the thing that you know better than anyone else. Maybe it's because you've worked in a company for 10, 15, 20 years. You find a pain point that you've discovered through working in that industry for the past 15 or 20 years, and then you build a product or service around that solves that pain point. Statistically, that's going to be the highest chance of you succeeding as a quote unquote entrepreneur. But ultimately, the definition of an entrepreneur has to be you are finding ways to solve pain points while simultaneously giving value to the world. Yeah. If you're not giving value, if you're just extracting, like you said, a zero-sum game, you're not. First of all, there's going to be a ceiling because you cannot just extract from the world unlimited value. You do have to give value. And secondly, it's going to have a very short life, whatever thing you're building. I don't deal with a lot of crypto entrepreneurs. I deal with people that are trying to build like real companies that are solving.
Well, let's move into the brand building. Let's talk about that because obviously it's so important. And when you started your podcast, let's start. Was that the first thing you really started when you started your own brand? Was that the hinge point? Was that the first thing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So when you first started it, what were your goals for it? What did you think it was going to entail?
So it's funny because when I started it, I didn't really know where it was going to go. When I started it, I was still building a company, and I was CRO at a company that was it was a broadcast software company. It was acquired. And my day-to-day was building out a sales team, building out a marketing team, helping take this product to market. So a lot of the first conversations I had were just following my passion of building out sales and marketing organizations within companies. And I would speak to CROs and CMOs and talk about sales and marketing strategy. So the first version of the podcast was really just me having conversations with people that were teaching me things about what I was doing in my day-to-day. And it was at that point in my life, it was my interest. And then as it grows and expands, then after the acquisition, I realized that there's a lot of other things that I'm interested in. So I started to have a lot of other people on the podcast. Now I start talking about raising money, mindset, mental health, physical health, all the things that I think are now important to me. So the journey of the podcast and the topics that I've brought onto the podcast really emulate where I'm at in my life and what I'm curious about. And I think that having some curiosity, some almost selfish curiosity in the topics you cover is key to creating content long-term. Because if you are creating content that you are not interested in, I feel like eventually you will burn out. Now, you asked me what was the purpose of it. So after the acquisition, I realized that, okay, I've started to build a little bit of momentum with this audience. I have a couple listeners now. So what am I going to do with it? And I could have launched a product or service immediately against that audience. I was fortunate that I didn't really have to worry too much about money at that point. And in my mind, I thought, let's, copy paste the Gary Vee model. And the Gary Vee model is give everything away for free.
Jab, jab, punch.
Exactly. Build an audience. And then in the future, you can use that audience for whatever you'd like to use them for. If I want to sell a product or service, now I have 1 million eyeballs that are ready and waiting for whatever I talk to them about. If I want to just monetize with ads, I can do that. If I want to, I've thought about this a lot. I think this is the future of content creation. I think that creators should find startups whose product aligns with their audience and then start to take small equity positions in those startups and then use their channel, their audience as sort of a take to market strategy for that early stage startup's product. If there's that alignment between the product and the audience avatar. And the reason why I think that's smart is because then the creator can focus on creating and not becoming an operator in a business. They can just find a way to, again, leverage their assets. So to answer your question, at around because I started the podcast before the company was acquired. So I started about 2 years before. At the point of the acquisition, that's when the style of content shifted slightly away from just pure sales and marketing topics. And then I thought, yes, jab, jab, punch, put out a ton of value, create content that I'm interested in, speak to people that would teach me something. Because I know there's a lot of me's in the world that would love to learn from incredible entrepreneurs. And then when I have critical mass of the audience, then I can figure out what I'd like to do with it. And that was the goal. And the goal is to do something also that I can do for the next 100 years of my life. So when I look at a podcast, I'm not building it to be acquired. I'm building it because it's something that I enjoy. And it's something that I can launch a product against it today, in 10 years, in 20 years from now, but I'll always keep building that audience.
Yeah, it's funny. We started this show as it was me and two of my buddies. That, we would go to the bar and hang out, whatever it was. People were like,
you just shoot the shit.
You guys were like the people around us was like, you guys are fucking hilarious. And so one day I was like, dude, we should just do a podcast. And then it just started as a good reason to get together with two of my buddies in here and just shoot the shit about nonsense. And I miss those days because those shows were really funny.
But then you start to evolve. So then you have to figure out, okay, now this is becoming a little bit more serious. I'm putting some money into it. I'm putting some energy into it. Okay, so now I got to figure out, how do I bring the most value to the audience? Who is the avatar that's actually listening to my show? Mm-hmm. What do they care about? How do I structure an interview so I can sort of break down break down the stress of meeting somebody for the first time, where they have their guard up and they really don't want to get too personal? How do I break that down and then find a way to really pull some great insights that can help the audience, so that whoever is listening, and I create my I really create my podcast for me 10 years ago, kind of like how you're writing your book, right? Yeah. So I create my podcast because I know that there's people in the audience that are struggling to figure out what to do with their life, are wondering if they're on the right path, the right journey. And the goal of my show now is to find some awesome entrepreneur, some great founder, some great CEO, and say, hey, listen, I want you to teach the ups and downs, the highs and lows, the bullshit that you've gone through. So whoever is listening feels that sense of comfort that whatever they're doing or whatever they're trying to figure out, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. People have already been through all this bullshit before. So just sort of keep on keeping on and keep on going. And I think that's probably how my shows evolve. So it wasn't this structured, perfectly architected thing. It was just, and by the way, I think most content and the best creators don't have this perfectly structured plan at the beginning. They just enjoy what they're doing.
They just like what they're doing.
Which is why they can do it for an extended period of time.
Well, what's funny, what do they say? Like 9 out of 10 podcasts never get past episode 2 or something.
I don't even know the numbers anymore.
It's insane.
But yeah, if you've released 10 episodes, you're in like the top 1%.
Yeah. So rule number 1, I tell people this all the time. If you're going to do a podcast, don't tell anyone about it until you have 7 episodes in the can. Because if you don't have 7 full episodes done, ready to go, chances of getting to the 8th one are very slim.
Yeah. Very smart.
Because a lot of people do this once or twice and then they're like, I want to do a podcast, and the lights come on. They're like, well, they don't realize that you just have to kind of be yourself.
People fuck up a lot of content creation because they get excited about it. And this is not just podcasting. Like, it could be posting on Instagram, posting on YouTube, writing, tweets, 3 times a day, whatever it is. People get super excited about it. They start, and then real life hits. It's kind of like the gym in January. Real life hits, and then they get distracted, and then they realize that, shit, I'm not making a lot of money on this thing in the first week, which is, bro, you should have had the foresight to figure that out before you press publish.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, that motivation and that reason why they started fizzles out. And then are you good?
I'm going to sneeze. I think I'm gonna
look at the light.
Do I look at the light?
Yeah, that's.
Not editing that out. That's going to stay there. Just like Joe Rogan, man. We keep it real.
That's a trick to get you to.
It is.
Yeah, you have that.
I was trying not to sneeze, not like induce it more. Like
I know, but when you have it, like you just got to get fucking
pepper in here. Just
got to get rid of it, dude.
Just make
but I think that's the biggest issue. I think that people have the wrong expectations going into content creation. They expect too much too quick.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. So let's say I'm Bill in Indiana.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bill. And Bill wants to create a podcast. So what should I'm curious what your expectations are for timeline to being able to make anything out of this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you can't. So I want you to listen to what I'm saying I would do if I needed to monetize this as quickly as possible. Because when I started doing it, it was a lot of fun for me, but I wasn't focused on the quickest path to revenue, which is it's not necessarily smart. It is what it is. I mean, I had my set of circumstances when I started my show. Not everybody's circumstances is the same. So let's make the assumption that you don't just want to, because you should find a way to monetize it and take it as seriously as possible, as quickly as possible. I think that's very important, because most people don't have the will to keep it going for a long period of time without making money or having some sort of business outcome from this podcast.
Well, what's worse is people don't understand. There's a marketing budget that goes with this. Like these things don't grow. These things don't grow organically like you think they would.
They don't.
You're not going to throw it up there and think that your mom's going to share it with her knitting group and everybody's going to be on it.
Podcast is probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to grow.
Yeah, you got to promote. It costs money to make this go.
And this is also why, I mean, you do video, I do video as well. I just built out a studio because I wanted to index on and rank on YouTube, which is, I mean, that's the second largest search engine in the world outside of Google. But outside of that, If you just do audio, nobody sees it. There's no organic reach. Anyways, so to answer your question, to start, figure out your objective, your North Star for the podcast. So if you're just podcasting the podcast, unless you have the financial means to do it, it's going to turn into a very expensive hobby very quickly and a very time-consuming hobby. So I would say that you should figure out how the podcast helps your business objectives, whatever that may be.
Or the business that you're in.
Yes, correct. So I started a podcast outside of the business that I was in. For most people, that's not smart. For most people, they should start a podcast that supports the business that they're in, meaning that the interviews that you have or the subject matter that you capture or the questions that you ask are questions that your customers are asking, because that means that the content that you're creating is going to turn into content that is actually going to be actively answering questions that your customers care about.
But more importantly, I'll take it one step further, like, because we're in the real estate business here. It's what we do, and I tell realtors all the time, if you're going to start a podcast, go after your clients, your existing clients that have businesses, and have them on to promote their businesses. Because so often, you can walk out the front door of any business and hit a realtor with a 7-iron in just about any direction. There's millions of us, right? But at the same time, if you're bringing someone on and trying to help their business, you're not going to have to ask for their business when it comes time.
No, so this is the second part of it. So not only is the content answering questions for your target customer, that if you do interview style, which I think is also a smart play if you're using it for a business objective, that hour where you're sitting with somebody, that hour is a relationship building, rapport building hour.
For sure.
So not only are you using it strategically to create content, you are also actively building rapport with somebody who could be a customer. So I think that's also a very smart strategy to use. I mean,
no, I laugh because yes, I mean, one of the main reasons for me doing this is to build a network, right?
Yeah.
And there are times, and here's a fun fact for the old podcast. There's times when you sit with people for an hour, and at the end of the hour, you're like, I don't really like this person. It's just like, not you. We're doing great. We're doing great, Scott. I'm not putting you on just, but no shit. I mean, can you honestly not say that's not true?
No, it's very true. It's very true. I mean, so it's funny because now I guess like my brand is podcaster. That's my brand right now. That's all I really fucking do. So everybody knows me as a podcaster, which means like even when I get asked to speak, it's not keynotes anymore. You know what it is? It's like moderate a panel on stage because you're a podcaster.
You're a good moderator.
Yeah.
You're a great moderator, Scott. That's what we want you to come
moderator.
Yeah.
But it's funny. So sometimes when I get asked to go on other people's shows, they always ask me like, who's your worst interview? I'll never answer. But damn straight, I have like a couple people that pop up in my head and I'm like, fuck.
Dude, well, the worst, man. Like, here's the thing. So back to monetizing, like the way you monetize a podcast, in my view, if there's other ways you tell me, but obviously in building that, you want to capture the audience best you can through a mailing list and all of those things, which is why we asked you guys to subscribe to the newsletter and all of those things. But then there's also, if you're listening to this now on any of our great podcast partners, you're hearing ads. Obviously, we get paid for those as they come up. You're hearing that right now. And then there's, of course, when guests come on, they have something to sell. There's affiliate stuff. Sometimes we can make money that way. And then there's the paid guest, which is the infotainment, which is part of this, right? Because you'll have people call up that really want to come on, that want to leverage your audience, and you've got to charge them sometimes. Come on. Scott did not pay to be here, by the way. So we like Scott's business. So he paid nothing to be here today. Just want to clarify that. But it happens occasionally. But the problem with the paid guests, and I'm guessing you have paid guests sometimes too, yes?
I've probably done about 5 or 6.
Rarely. Okay.
Because I hate them.
I hate them too. Because here's why. Because it turns into an infomercial.
Yeah.
And there was a dude one time that my booker booked me, and he was selling some really complicated water system, like some crazy water system for, state municipalities.
Yeah.
And he paid to come on, and I'm like going through this, and I'm like, dude, this is reading like a science manual. This is terrible. And at the end of it, I end up saying, hey man, I'm going to give you your money back because I'm not hearing this at all.
Yeah.
Because it just would be terrible.
Yeah.
And
it hurts the show too.
Yeah. I'll give you all the footage you want and you can have that. And there you go.
Yeah. I think that, so that's why I think that tying the podcast back to your business and having a product that you sell is the smartest reason why you should start a podcast.
Yeah.
So have a product or service that's lined up with the audience.
But isn't some of that like when Alex Jones was selling like the vitamins or whatever he was selling on?
Well, Joe Rogan was selling what was it, On It or the nootropic?
But hell yeah, Joe Rogan's like with it and in shape and like a UFC dude.
Oh,
Like,
well, that's what. Okay,
I'm
so
talking
first
about
of all,
Alex
yeah,
Jones
no,
is
no, no, I
selling
know.
nutritional supplements, dude.
So yeah,
Doesn't go with the brand, Alex.
You gotta figure out what actually makes sense.
You want to sell a chunky bar? I might buy one. You look like you enjoyed
but people
one.
read through that bullshit.
Yeah,
people
it's
read
so
through
nonsense.
it. People know when you actually like my best advertisers.
Yeah.
And again, I don't have my own product, but if I did, I'd have to make sure that it fits, right? It actually fits. I'm thinking about different things that I can launch. I'm thinking about like products like how to build a podcast. That fits. I've done it. It fits, right? If I was promoting something that I've never used before, people smell through that BS all day, and it's really not gonna. Yeah, you make a quick buck, but then it ruins the trust with the audience. So all the advertisers that work long term with me, they're all products I use. Yeah. So I've worked with HubSpot for 3 years now. Yep. I've worked with Indeed for 2 years.
Affiliate program with HubSpot.
We do have a great affiliate program. I mean, but these are tools. It doesn't matter that they're software. They're tools that I actually use on a day-to-day for my actual business. So it makes a lot of sense because I can talk about why they actually help me and why they didn't make my life less stressful on a day-to-day. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to pick a product, if you're going to build a podcast, tie it back to whatever you're selling, make sure that it just syncs up, because if you don't, you're going to ruin trust.
No, I would never promote a product I don't use. And this next segment is brought to you by Vagisil. So, no, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. No, we're not doing that. No, but you have to. And I think that's the issue. Is I think about a lot that scene from The Social Network when they're trying to sell ads on early Facebook. And they're like, no, we can't sell ads. We don't know what it is yet. Like, there's such a fine line of when and how you monetize.
So yes, correct. If you have a product that is aligned with your audience, then I don't see an issue with monetizing early on if it's actually something that helps your audience and solves a problem your audience has. So for example, if I'm starting a podcast on real estate and I am a real estate agent and somebody reaches out to me and say, hey, can you list my house? Okay, like, go for it. That's kind of why I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. If I'm starting a podcast on the creator economy and I have a course teaching people how to get their first 1,000 followers on Instagram, no problem, because I've done it. Hopefully you've actually done it yourself. That's a precursor for selling it. But then the content aligns with that. But if you are, for example, trying to monetize through ads for not completely off products, but like adjacent products, say like you, for example, you start a podcast and you get an option to sell athletic greens and it's a business podcast. There's a place for it, but it's not right. I would say, don't worry about monetizing too quickly. Don't inundate your audience with ads.
AG1 now, no longer
AG1. That's true.
Rebrand. I know the CEO actually rebranded to AG1.
They do a lot of podcast ads.
Yeah, dude, you know what's crazy? The CEO of now AG1. Do you know where I know her from?
No.
She used to be a Hooters girl.
Actually?
Oh shit.
Did you know her?
I did know her. Yeah, way back a million years ago.
That's
yes,
so funny.
I did. Yes, I did.
I don't know her story. I haven't had her on the show yet.
Yeah. She's great. She's great. I'm not gonna throw her name out. I didn't want that out there, but
she built an incredible.
She was
company.
at Cinnabon. No, well, she was no. She was the CEO at Cinnabon. Cinnabon got bought by private equity, and then Athletic Greens just hired her as CEO. She's not founder there. She just took it over as CEO.
Okay, I don't know
the rebrand.
I don't know the story.
Yeah, her name's Kat. She's great. So there you go. Yeah.
You should bring her on.
Yeah, now that I say that out loud, I probably should.
Yeah,
you're right.
That's very cool.
I should. Yeah, but I mean, so there you go. Take that. Everybody thinks Hooters waitresses, never amount to anything. There you go.
I mean, it's the same as like somebody starting their career as like a bottle service girl or like you start somewhere.
Well, yeah, bottle service girls have to end up in real estate.
They do end up in real estate.
I think when you apply at the clubs, you just have to say on the bottom of it, yes, I agree to get a real estate license.
Yes,
I agree. I agree right now to get that license later. I mean, look, dude, if you can get somebody to buy a $3,000 bottle of vodka, hey man, you could probably sell a house.
I agree.
Probably sell a house. Oh boy, now I forgot what we were talking about because now we're talking about bottle girls.
We were talking about. I know it's a distraction, right? We're in Vegas.
Oh, yeah, we are.
No, we're talking about when to monetize.
Yes,
and I think it's after you've established credibility in the market. I think that when you're talking about ad-based sales, I think you have to establish credibility and trust first. I think it's a little bit different than a product-based sale where you can sell immediately. Mm-hmm. If I have a product or service and I run Facebook ads, or if I have a high-ticket consulting offer or like a done-for-you service or a physical good or a software, I mean, you sell it right away to the audience that needs it. But when you are selling ads, you are selling based on trust, and trust takes time. Like if I have a software, if I sell you the software today, it's going to work today. if I'm selling you access to an audience, the audience and the return on that investment is going to increase the longer that I have that relationship with the audience. So day one, it's not going to be as good as day 1,000.
See, that brings up such an interesting point, which is the real trust in the real audience. And
Yes.
and anymore, it's so difficult to gauge, like, who's got a real audience. Like, if you look at, I mean, I've had people hit us up to be on the podcast. I have 1 million followers on Instagram, and you look at a reel and it's got 800 views.
So that's a good signal.
Like, bro, those are all bots. It's not real. And I think everybody went in this gold rush of followers back in the day to build these artificial, audiences that don't resonate with them, that don't engage with them, that they could care less.
I know. I mean, there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
But-
And that concept is so hard to reconcile. So,
Well, what it does is if you are starting, it's just demoralizing, because you are looking at somebody that has this fake audience and you're saying, well, how could I ever get there? Well, meanwhile, they actually don't have any influence. They don't have any audience.
Yeah.
And you're benchmarking against bullshit. So when you start, I mean, I would say this is another idea. You shouldn't focus on numbers. You should focus on results that actually mean something, right? So if you are building an audience, you don't need 1 million followers, and you shouldn't be benchmarking your success against somebody who does, because that's all vanity metrics.
Yeah.
I think that you should be focusing on, okay, let's figure out how to build a channel, build a platform. Doesn't matter if it's Twitter, Instagram, podcast, YouTube. And then what is the leading indicator for success? So is it retention and watch time on my YouTube videos? Is it shares on Instagram? Is it retweet? Find that leading metric, leading indicator that's going to actually convert into an actual business result. And that's how you gauge your success. So you can make a lot of money having 10,000 followers on Instagram that are all buying your product or service. You can make a lot of money with 50,000 subscribers on YouTube that have 60% retention on your video all the way through to the end. Like, there's better things to look at.
I want to ask you something I struggle with.
Okay.
I struggle with this in content creation anymore. And have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy? You seen that movie?
No.
All right. Idiocracy. It's a Luke. You should watch this movie because it's pretty scary.
Okay.
It's a movie about Luke Wilson goes into the future. He travels to the future, or is frozen or something. I don't remember how he gets there, but America is so dumbed down. Like, everybody is basically a blithering idiot, and he's a normal dude and happens to go like 100 years in the future, and he's the smartest guy on earth.
That's so funny.
Because America's gotten so dumbed down. And when you watch this, it's kind of where we're headed, I think, as a society, because here's one of the things that I grapple with, right? Which is, I just don't understand how certain things become as popular as they are. Because here I am, I'm doing my best to educate, to help, to encourage people to do great. And you're like, fuck, I'm busting this stuff out. I'm doing what I think is very smart, very intelligent content. And then the fucking Haktua girl, who literally probably can't even spell Haktua, however you spell it, is dropping a podcast that probably gets more hits than I do in the first week.
It's doing very well right now.
It makes no sense to me.
Well,
how do you reconcile that?
Well,
do you dumb your shit down, or you just
no? You don't, because again, the answer all comes back to the sort of like the basic principles that we're talking about. Is like, what's your North Star? What's your objective for the content? Because if your objective is to become Joe Rogan, then you shouldn't make highbrow, super complex, because Joe Rogan is not highbrow and super complex, and neither are murder podcasts that also sit in the top 5 or whatever. Like, you have to understand what is your goal? Like, what is your goal? Do you just want to, first of all, this isn't new to podcasting. This isn't new to content. How many people would sit down and watch a Senate hearing versus the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fair.
So, I mean, less people will watch a Senate hearing, which are probably pretty important conversations.
But the thing that was trending on Twitter.
But you're just asking why there's a standard distribution of people that love entertainment versus.
No, but okay, fine. Super Bowl to me is entertainment. You have the best athletes in the world performing at the highest level.
How can you?
But
it's not entertainment to you. That's my point.
But the highest retweeted tweet 2 days ago was some kid I did not know existed called the Rizzler, who's 5 years old, that's on a wrestling show, and all he does is do this. And that's the highest retweeted thing on Twitter 2 days ago.
I understand why you don't understand, because I don't. It's not entertainment to me too.
No,
but it's entertainment to someone.
Like, I want to slap my kids that they even think they're like, no, you don't understand. I'm like, you're right.
But
I know.
To answer your question though, like you got to create content that accomplishes the objective that you set out for that content.
I feel like I'm standing like I'm the old man on the porch yelling at the moon right now.
I create the same type of content as you. Yeah. I create the exact same type of content. Yeah. And you don't think that I've seen people that started podcasts after me that are just pure like culture podcasts. Yeah. Like just shooting the shit on just culture that have grown way faster than me. Yeah. And I look at it, I'm like, fuck, this is really frustrating. But then again, I'm like, who am I serving? Yeah. Who am I actually serving? When I sit down with yourself, when I sit down with the founder of Netflix, the founder of Reebok, when I sit down with Seth Godin and we have these incredibly intelligent, like just like the forefront of thought leadership, not me, the other guys. You're
extrapolating this from them. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it.
I'm not benchmarking myself against some of those dudes.
I get it.
I think, wow, these are ideas that can actually change the world from people that have actually changed the world. If I dumb down my content, then I'm one less voice that is bringing those ideas to the masses. So I'm hoping that, my growth is slower than somebody who talks about sports or culture or entertainment. But again, it's not who I serve.
Because something else I wrestle with, we talk about content creation, being omnipresent, being on all channels. Yeah. I think that the dopamine addiction is a real thing.
It is.
I think that it's creating ADHD in our kids. It's creating things, which is why I'm trying to actually, if I'm going to create content, I actually want it to be valuable to somebody.
But can I add one thing? Sorry,
please,
just really quickly.
Do it. So you got whatever you want, man.
No, just because you create content that serves an audience that's trying to like build a business or become better versions of themselves, it doesn't mean you have an excuse to not achieve mastery at that content creation, not sort of perfect your craft, not prep, not find ways to make that content still as entertaining and useful as possible. So some people sort of, if they're creating smart content, I find they default to, well, it's smart, so I'm not going to focus on trying to find
entertaining,
which I think is also incorrect.
Yeah.
So you also can't get lazy just because you're targeting a certain niche that maybe is like a little bit more highbrow.
No, I think, look, if people are watching or listening to something that you do and they don't laugh or get pissed or experience some emotion, what are you doing?
This is why, as a podcast host, what your goal is to make the person feel safe so they can be real. Because that realness is going to be the X factor in the entertainment. Because again, keep in mind the people that you speak to, who I speak to, they've been interviewed by 20, 30 different podcast hosts, and they've been on all the different YouTube channels. So the X factor is doing your prep and then really just finding a way to pull out things that haven't been pulled out before, because that alone will create entertainment value.
Well, I find when I prep folks, when I do this, like I told you when we showed up, I don't have a list of questions. There's nothing on the desk. If you're watching us on YouTube, I don't have questions, because I find that when I used to do that, I would go through, and even using ChatGPT or whatever else, blah, blah, you're pulling the same stuff that everybody pulls, and it becomes the same repetitive stuff. Yeah. And I've seen people come through here, and then I've seen them on other podcasts, and you can just tell they're on autopilot. Like, here's question A, and it's like, here's the answer for A. Here's question B. Here's A. And it's the same thing over and over. So I don't do that. But I found the best questions that I do. That's why I like authors, right? Because I can power through a book pretty quick, and I can find stuff in the book that interests me that nobody else has probably taken the time to get through. Yeah. So how do you prep for a guest?
I watch their interviews and I try and find things that they speak about, but the host doesn't go into. So they'll speak about a personal story, but the host won't take it a step further and ask how that impacted their life or what they felt going through that story, which leads to a whole other array of sub stories coming out of that one particular thing. But I'll watch a lot of interviews with them. And so I get a basic premise for what they're like domain expert and subject matter expert at, but then I'll just go a level deeper. It's really not that complicated. Like a little bit
because you can see when people light up a little bit.
Yeah. And you can see what gives people energy. Yeah. And if it doesn't, and by the way, I tell them this before they even start. I say, because this is how the conversation goes with every guest. I'll say, what would make this a win for you? And they'll say, well, I just want to serve your audience. And then I'll say, what do you have to promote? And like, oh, this book. And then
sounds like a conversation we just had 49 minutes ago.
It's the same thing every single time. So I know how it's going to go. And I know they want to serve my audience. And I know that they're not going to say, this is actually what I care about. And this is, so I have to find it. I have to search for it. And when you notice somebody lights up about a topic, I don't care if there's 6 other topics that you had planned, go really deep on that one topic, because they're going to have so much emotion and they're going to bring out so much about that one particular thing that and they'll be appreciative because they'll recognize too.
Yeah.
They're not stupid. They'll recognize when you want to just sit in a topic and just bask in it because it's something they care so deeply about and it's so recent on the top of their mind, and that's when the best content comes out.
Yeah, I've had episodes of this show where people come on that are subject matter experts. Vina Jetty, great example, is a friend of mine. Vina's has $1 billion in assets and multifamily under management in her portfolio. And we never talked about multifamily.
Exactly.
We just never got to it.
Because she's bored of talking about it.
So we never got to it. We talked about not raising worthless kids for literally an hour. That's what we talked about.
That's a beautiful subject because a lot of people that have massive amounts of wealth have a really hard time succession planning and figuring out how to not turn their kids into assholes because they never had to work for anything in their life.
Yep.
So that's an incredible topic that a lot of people who are listening to this, who have achieved success and have made a lot of money, would actually tune into, because there's people that they have no interest building $1 billion multifamily portfolio.
Yeah.
They've made their money in software or consumer goods, and they've just absolutely killed it. And their money's working for them now, and they don't want to fucking deal with starting again. They do a little bit of angel investing here and there, but they're not going to build $1 billion multifamily portfolio. But the second there's this common thread, well, I have money and I have kids and she has money and she has kids, all of a sudden this podcast becomes interesting because now you're speaking to the human element behind the successful person, not just the tactical stuff that, she's done it at scale, but I could probably hear the tactical stuff from another 20 people on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because you create so much content, too much stuff.
Sometimes, dude.
Huh? Too much
sometimes.
Tell me about the imposter syndrome. You got to have it sometimes.
I have the imposter syndrome all the time.
Yeah.
But you know what? You put in, like anything, if you just want to, if you do it enough, you start to get over it. I don't know how else to describe it. I have imposter syndrome whenever I sit in front of huge guests. I have imposter syndrome when I write a newsletter. So my list is about 300,000 people. So I get stressed out sometimes when I'm.
How'd you build the list?
A lot of writing.
Writing and one person at a time.
One email at a time.
Well, can we talk about that? We're going to come back to it. I didn't mean to cut you off. Finish your thought and we'll come back to that.
No, imposter syndrome is tough to deal with. I think that, like most people, my imposter syndrome really shows when I step on stage. That always stresses me out. But that's like the most common fear in the world. So that's not that unusual. And the way that I've dealt with it is kind of how I've dealt with everything. I just put myself into that situation again and again and again and again, and eventually it becomes less stressful.
Yeah.
So the first time I step on stage, I'm shitting myself. And then the 100th time, I'm not. And it's really like, it's not rocket science, but what I would do is in between the big stage gigs where there's like a significant size audience, I would ask anybody and everybody who's putting on an event, can I just please talk for 10 to 15 minutes for free? Just let me talk about, you can tell me what subject. I can talk about entrepreneurship, marketing, Instagram, podcasting. I can talk about software. I can talk about sales, marketing, anything, like any of those. Just let me do like 10 to 15 minutes. Let me just keep exposing myself. It's just like exposure.
Yeah.
And then over time.
Obstacle is the way.
Exactly. That's it. And over time, you get a little bit less stressed out, and you don't get like a small little panic attack before you jump on stage. And I think that that's how I've dealt with most versions of imposter syndrome. I've just done it so much.
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to KG last night, my buddy Kevin Griffin, speaking at the same event he is, and we were at dinner and we were talking about,
great speaker too.
Well, here's the funny thing, right? Yeah. Kevin is the lead singer of Better Than Ezra. He's been on stage for 40 years, right? Yeah. 30 years, whatever it is, been on stage. And he told me his first time he went up to do a speech, not sing with a speech. He goes, man, my throat sealed up. And I was like, holy shit. He goes, I completely fell apart on stage. I was never been that nervous in my life. And this is a guy that has been on stage a million times. And he just said, yeah, and he kind of worked through it.
You just work through it.
And he's like, now I can
there's certain things like, I wouldn't drink a ton of caffeine before I go on stage because that doesn't help anxiety. You can do something called like box breathing, which is really just inhaling, holding a breath, and then letting it out, which also sort of like there's a biological response which calms your nerves. Prepping, I mean, it sounds stupid, but if you prep the material and you don't have to worry about the material, or you're speaking about things that you genuinely know about, that also calms the anxiety. But even outside of all those things, just exposing yourself to it more often. I actually, it's so funny. The first time I ever really spoke in public, I don't know why I do this to myself. It was at Inbound, which is a conference with, as of last, I spoke at Inbound 3 times so far. in my life. And the last one, I think there's 112,000 people. It's a massive conference in Boston. And that was the first time I jumped on stage to do a panel with a couple other people that were on my show. They invited me out because they've sponsored the podcast for the past 3 years now. So they said, do you want to speak at Inbound? And that was kind of like my first foray into public speaking. And I wouldn't recommend that being the first thing that most people did. I think there was like a sweat imprint on the seat behind me. Yeah. It was very nervous. But the point is,
that's like you're going to lose your virginity to a porn star while we film it. Not good. Not good at all. That's not good.
So, but the point is, after that, I'm like, okay, that was stressful. And you always think you're worse than you are, by the way.
Yeah.
Of
course.
Everyone was like, great job. Like, I mean, like, Gina's like sitting in the audience. She's like, you fucking killed it. Like, good job. Everybody who I was on the panel with, like, awesome job. Like, it was really well done. And in my mind, I just felt like I wanted to have a heart attack and die. I felt like I was gonna have a heart attack. I'm like, just do it now, so I don't have to deal with the next 20 minutes.
It's like that scene from Old School where like you just like it's an out of body experience, and the speech goes off. You're like, what happened?
Yeah,
like,
but I lived, and then after that, I was like, I don't want to feel like that again. And
reps.
Yeah, it was just reps. And then I just jumped into every single speaking opportunity that I
What's so fun? Because people, you talk about.
We can talk about the newsletter growth too if you want. But
we're going to get to that. But like most people talk about imposter syndrome, like they don't even want to turn a camera. Oh, I look terrible on camera. I sound bad on camera. I don't want to do this. Like just.
So my recommendation for somebody who wants to start creating content is imposter syndrome is real. And of course, you're going to be stressed out. But you have to find a way to, again, architect the environment so that you forget that you're creating the content, because most people can just have a conversation, but we can have a conversation. Doesn't matter if the camera's on or off. Yeah. But some people sitting in this chair, when the cameras turn on, they turn into a different person. Now, what you have to do if you're starting out is you have to find a way to architect the environment so that you don't know that the cameras are on and you don't feel like you're creating content. So what I recommend when people first start, because video is usually the issue. It's not usually writing. People don't usually stress out about writing, but video is usually an issue. I say, sit down across from somebody, ask them to print out or on their phone, have a list of questions that they're all topics that you know about, turn on a camera, and then block off 2 hours, like Sunday afternoon, whatever, when you have nothing else going on. And that person, I just want them to sit there and ask you about things that you know about. And you will forget the cameras are there after about 10 to 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you're just going to be having a conversation with somebody, talking about things that you care about, that you're passionate about. And if you look back at that recording, that's actually incredible content. Yeah. That's all it is. So I think that's one point. You don't have to look directly into the camera for it to be good. No, you just have to talk about things that you care about. Yeah. So, and by the way, if you actually look at, there's something called the fly on the wall effect. The fly on the wall effect is when people, this is what podcast content does well. Mm-hmm. People who are scrolling on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever, they like to feel like they are the fly on the wall of a conversation. When somebody is staring at you directly, you do not feel like you're a fly on the wall. It feels like the person who's staring at the camera directly is directly communicating with me. But when I'm in a conversation like this with a podcast, there's a camera just off to the side or whatever, and the audience knows that I'm not speaking to them, I'm speaking to you. There's a fly on the wall effect, and they actually enjoy that content slightly more than if I was talking directly to them in the camera. Yeah, because you feel like you're preaching. Yes, exactly. Yeah, nobody wants to be told what to do. No. But if I have a smart thought and it's clipped out and it's in a conversation, very organic conversation with someone else, that's the type of content that people share and people like and people engage with. And that's why if you actually look at, I can't remember her name. There's one woman, I'm sure if you Google this story, you'll be able to find it. She rented out a podcast studio on her own and just spoke off camera. And I'm Googling. See if you can find. So I have to fucking remember her name. Rent it out. I'll tell you the story of what she did though. Okay. She booked out a podcast studio. We'll call her Mary for today's purposes. We'll call her Mary. She booked out a podcast studio and she tested preaching directly to the camera versus no host there. Just her talking to somebody as if there was a host, and she's just talking about the same stuff that she'd be talking to the camera to, and the engagement was higher on the content where it looked like she was in a podcast. Do you find that? Because here's the weird thing: I find that the clips that we do of the podcast when I have a guest, do better on Instagram. The solo pod stuff does better on TikTok. I don't know why. I don't know TikTok as well as Instagram. Yeah. So I'm not an SME not a subject matter expert at
Yeah,
TikTok.
I don't. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know why that is, but that stuff does better over there than.
But I look at, so when I'm trying to figure out a strategy for myself, I look at people that have way more money to invest in marketing and people that are trying to figure out that strategy. So
Starbucks effect.
yeah, I mean, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. If I'm looking at how to grow a podcast on TikTok, I'm probably looking at Stephen Bartlett with Diary of a CEO. I'm probably looking at Chris Williamson with Modern Wisdom. I'm seeing what are their strategies that they're trying
and emulating them
as a first step. And then you also, by the way, I'm a big fan of reverse engineering success. So whether or not it's podcast, newsletter, Twitter, Instagram, find the people that are in your domain that are killing it on that platform. And as a first pass at content creation, look at what they're doing and copy that just to start. Then you'll make it your own. But don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's people that are growing on Twitter faster and quicker than anyone else, and go find that person and go figure out, okay, how do they structure their tweets? What do they write about? What is the formula? Is it this quippy little 3-point thought, or is it more of like a longer block of text, which it usually never is on Twitter? Like what is the formula that really gets a lot of engagement and speaks to a Twitter audience, and who is the person that's doing that the best right now, and go find them. And then and that's how you start your content journey. You just study the people that have been doing it before.
Emulate. I love it, man. That's it. It's one of those things where we talked about fake it till you make it, which I'm not a fan of. I think people see through that shit. It's not, emulating is not the same as imitating. Yeah. There's two different things. Yeah. If you become a carbon copy imitation of somebody that's doing successful, or you're trying to, people see through that as I'm not going to use the authentic. Well, I said authentic. I hate that word on podcast. It's like the buzzword. I hate it. It's not genuine. We'll use that. But emulating someone, like you said, that's doing it a certain way is the smart way. That's the path. And
the reason why you're not copying is because you will eventually learn that the best content, it brings in your lived experience. It brings in the stuff that you've dealt with. That's why if you're talking about, if you're just trying to pontificate on ideas and you're just trying to keep it very high level, it's never going to really hit home with people. But if you talk about the stuff that you've dealt with in your life, the problems that you're still dealing with literally right now, that's and then you structure it through a frame that fits that audience. That's how your content does well. So if you, as a podcast host, if you never bring in your personal experience in your personal life, it's going to be boring. But if you do bring in your personal experience in your personal life, and then you figure out how to edit a reel that works really well on TikTok, that's a winning formula.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes for my wife, nothing is out of balance.
Well, I mean, even on this hour podcast, I've spoken about Gina a couple times. I spoke about what she does, because it's my life. It's what I've lived, and if we spent even more time, I'd probably talk about all the stuff that hasn't worked out, and we haven't really gone there. But I think that's really important to bring up. Yeah. So because that's what differentiates you too. If not, you're just a talking head. And your favorite content creators. There's some big creators that don't include their personal life, but they're like vanilla. It's like they could be subbed out by anyone else talking about the same shit. Yeah. Like the best creators, they bring their whole life into it, or a significant portion of it.
But is that really true though? Because look at Gary Vee. You know nothing about that dude other than there's garage sales, sports cards, and the Jets.
Yeah, but
what else do you know?
But I know that so to play devil's advocate, I do know that he came up with his dad's wine shop, and he did he did his wine stuff. He's pretty. He doesn't talk about his divorce. No, because he puts out he puts out what he wants you to know. He doesn't talk about his divorce. Here's what I'm going to give you. These three things. I think that would be a great extra dimension that would speak to him, who he is as a person. Yeah, but he's just so great. It's like, he's even said, I'm going to give you these three things. This is what you get. You get the Jets, you get cards, you get what is it? Garage sales. That's what you get. I think that another thing that's important is to understand that some people built very large audiences when the market wasn't as crowded. Yeah. And the game that we're playing in right now is red ocean for sure. Is red ocean. And I think that, okay, fine. Maybe 10 years ago. What worked for him, it will not work for you. Will not work for you. 100%. So I think that being more authentic. And this is why I think vloggers do so well. Vloggers like on YouTube. Yeah. Because they include their whole life. I mean, look at the Paul brothers. Like there wasn't a bit of their life that they didn't cover. And now they're enormous household names. And now even the biggest up and coming stars that your kids like that I don't even understand are streamers that stream nonstop their whole life. They stream their whole life. So I'm not saying you have to go to that extreme, but I'm saying that including little bits of your life does help create, it turns you into a human and not just another thing to scroll through on Instagram. It's
so funny because my success, really the pinnacle of what made it was my parents on reality television. That's what made me, right? Being on The Apprentice. And even though that was a crafted story line, you know, it was very crafted and very edited to tell a story that was entertaining and compelling. I get that. But you look at the difference now, you're right. There's people who are like 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Their house is just on, what is it? That guy Kai or whatever his name is?
He's longest live stream ever. So he just streams in his house, like nonstop.
Just nonstop.
So this is who you're competing with. So again, maybe 10 years ago, you didn't have to do that. Yeah. But now, first of all, I think that it's good because it allows you to, like, listen, we could talk about, at any point, we talk about relationships and how the right partner can make or break it. And I can give you examples of shit that hasn't worked out when I felt like, you know, my world is ending. And Gina's been like, Scott, shut the fuck up. You're fine. Like
which a good partner should.
Yeah. I mean, but that, I don't want to exclude that from my content because I think that's actually useful for people.
That's a good, I'm going to ask you this question because a lot of high entrepreneurs, like a lot of high level entrepreneurs are built a certain way when it comes to dealing with failure, stress, everything else. And for me, like, I got to let it hit me. Like it's got to hit me. I need it to sting me for like one day, right? I need one day of sting on it. And like, I'll tell my wife like, this is the fucking sky is falling. Everything is blah, blah, blah. And I can let go of those emotions on a dime. Like I'll just decide as Mikey C-Rock said, does it go in the tank or the trunk? Yeah. You know what I mean? I'll make that decision very quickly. Does it, become baggage or turn into fuel? Yeah. And it's always fuel for me. But my poor wife will carry that shit around, carry my like purging of this anger for days. Is your wife, does she dump it off quick or does she carry it?
She gets rid of it very quickly.
Does she? Good for you, man.
She gets rid of it very quickly.
My poor wife.
She is about like, she's also very entrepreneurial. She built her own business too. And she realizes like, there is no benefit to sitting with this. It doesn't solve anything. Yeah. Like if shit is going to be bad, fine. But it's like whatever's created the bad shit has already happened. There's no time travel here. You gotta fix it. So what are the actions that allow you to fix it?
How long do you let it sting you when it hits? You give a couple. Is it a day for you? A couple of days? Like what's the sting?
A day or two.
Day or two.
Yeah.
Do you wallow in it a little bit?
No,
I'm vertical. I'm all the way in it for like a full day, man.
No, I'm trying to think. I've never thought about this before.
I'm just all the way in, man, for like, it's like, fuck, I'm an idiot. This is so stupid. Yeah, it's bad.
I don't know. I think that what happens is I wake up and I feel like shit and I realize that I'm going to have to deal with this bullshit. And then I'm very good at throwing myself into work. I don't know if that's a healthy thing. Healthy. But I definitely throw
better
myself.
than crack.
I think so.
It's way better than the crack.
Most doctors have recommended work is better than crack. But
most. Who's the one that didn't? Who's the one doctor out there that said, you know what? Maybe the crack's the way to go.
I think I'm following FTC advertising guidelines. Yes. I can't say 100% FDA.
Most. There's one doctor out there, Dr. J. That's who says. The crack is better than anything else.
Yeah, I don't think I think that I throw myself into work. And then after like putting in, because every day is always busy.
Yeah.
After my day of busyness and when I'm like sort of, relaxing at night, which is just usually more emails, but it's relaxing to a degree to me. Then I start to map out, okay, what are the action items that I have to do to take care of this thing while still feeling a little bit stressed about it. But I would say first 48 hours is when I'm saying, okay, this is what has to happen. This is who I have to have a hard conversation with. And it is what it is because I want to get the hard conversations done with ASAP. And it's, by the way, problems are usually not solved, but always include hard conversations.
Always.
And I want to get those done ASAP, which means that I'm forcing myself to schedule the calls with the people that I have to get this problem solved or moved forward. And then you just get that flywheel going. And then eventually it will get solved and you will wake up and life will be fine.
Yeah.
But
I've said many times the answer to a lot of your problems is on the other end of a hard phone call.
It always is.
Always.
And by the way, most of your problems, I mean, this is not 100% true, but most of your problems are not always as bad as you think they are. And when you have those I don't know what you've gone through.
No, dude. Here's my thing, bro. I'm always reminded, if you're a well-traveled human,
yeah.
If you're like well-traveled, like deep and like, if you've been to like Cairo, like the not so nice parts of Cairo,
yeah.
You and we don't have any real problems.
Yeah.
Like we have no real problems. Those people got real problems.
Yeah.
It just depends on your perspective.
I think a lot of the problems that we're fortunate to have, and the people that listen to this podcast the people that listen to this podcast have, are very privileged problems.
Yeah.
Like they're usually money problems, but it's not about not being able to put food on the table.
Not about having to walk 7 miles to get fresh water.
It's about a deal falling through or someone getting sued.
Yeah.
But like to be able to even be in that position means that you figured out life to some degree.
It's a blessing. It is. And only because I do want to talk about the importance of this, because I was talking about it last night with Kevin, like I told you, but I want to talk about the value of that mailing list, how to build it, why there's value. I think it's so important. Let's talk about that.
So, I also agree with that, which is why I built a very large mailing list, because I didn't want to ever just rely on the platforms. Mm-hmm. Like I know that Instagram can be shut down overnight. YouTube can be shut down. All this stuff can be shut down overnight if you don't own it, right? So when I started creating content, it's not a super complicated strategy, but the CTA was always subscribed to the newsletter. Mm-hmm. So over the past 6 years, the link in bio, the CTA, top of the show notes, every single YouTube video, and I've tried, you mentioned at the beginning, as a creator, I've tried to put out lots of different types of content. I've tried to see what works. Now I have a podcast. I used to put out like strategy and tutorial videos on YouTube. I've used to do like solo YouTube. So there's about 5,000 YouTube videos where the first line is subscribe to newsletter.scottdclary.com.
It's a CTA right there.
It's a CTA for everything. So just making sure that you cross-pollinate your audience repeatedly is very important, meaning if you put out a podcast, if you put out a YouTube video, in the show notes, in the YouTube description, link in bio is always email capture. And then you deliver value through the newsletter, and then you promote the shit out of the newsletter.
How often do you send the newsletter out?
Twice a week.
Twice a week?
So
holy shit.
Hear me out. So I have one newsletter, then I have one like summary wrap up. So the newsletter is a newsletter, and it talks about, and I'll
and the summaries are AI generated summaries of the podcast.
No,
You're writing it?
No. It's not a summary that way. It's a summary as in, these are the podcasts that came out this week. Okay. With links to the podcasts. I mean, like,
and if you don't have time to listen, here, just check it out. Here
exactly.
Here's my biggest takeaways from this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Smart. I'm behind on that, dude. I'm behind.
It's fine.
I gotta get caught up.
Figure it out. But I have one more thought on this. So the newsletter, the subject so I have sort of two content flows. So my first content flow is podcast, and then we take the long form podcast and we clip it out into shorts and reels. And like I said, I put out a summary on the weekend about the podcast that dropped that week, and turns out to tweets and everything like that. But the second content flow is what leads to my midweek newsletter. So the topic that I choose to discuss in my midweek newsletter is the result of my second content flow. So the first one is podcast, derivative pieces. The second content flow, which I think is a really smart strategy, which works very well for me, is I test a whole bunch of ideas on Twitter or Threads, doesn't matter. Like I'll put out 10 different, I'll tweet like 10 times a day. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I'll write out some ideas. I'll tweet them out. I'll see which one gets the most engagement. And the one that gets the most engagement, I'll turn it into, if you look on my Instagram, there's little graphics with these tweets. Mm-hmm. I'll take that thought and I'll turn it into a solo episode on the podcast. I'll take that thought and I'll turn it into a newsletter as well, because I know that if I test 10 ideas on Twitter a day, that's 50 tweets a week or plus minus. And I take out of all those ideas, one gets the most engagement. I know that idea, for whatever reason, resonates with
it's going to have the most value.
And then that's a super easy testing ground for all of your content. And then you take that and you turn it into long form written content, and it does very well. So, I mean, you also have to have, I think that there's a couple ideas there. First, yes, have a newsletter, write a newsletter, but also how do you think through every week the content that there's going to be some certainty You can't predict 100%, but some certainty that content is going to resonate. Have a testing ground for your content too. And that's what I use Twitter for.
What are you using to manage your newsletter? Just like MailChimp, or using like High Level? What are you using?
So I'm only pausing because I'm in the middle of transitioning the newsletter. So I was on Substack for a long time. Right now I'm moving my main newsletter to Kit, ConvertKit. I know Nathan Barry. He's a really cool guy. He built a great platform. And then now I'm actually hiring somebody to write a second newsletter on the creator economy, which I have not started yet. And that's going to be hosted on a platform called Stan.
Okay.
And Stan is like, this is not my products or anything. These are big, large companies that I use. So ConvertKit is a great newsletter system. I think like James Clear is on there, who wrote Atomic Habits. I think Sahil Bloom, if you're a newsletter follower, he writes on there. And then Stan is, they also have newsletter sequencing, but they also have all these other tools for creators. They have it's like a link in bio service where you can host your products and you can build community. So it accomplishes a lot of different things for creators as well. So anyway, ConvertKit is one, Stan is the other if you're looking for some creator tools. But
cool.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, dude, man, just like that, an hour and 15 minutes has flown by.
Good.
If they want to find you, how do they find you, bro?
Easy. All the social is at Scott D. Clary. And then you can go to successstorypodcast.com.
Well, bro,
I do a lot of the same stuff here.
Well, I appreciate it, man. When I'm in Miami, I'll come through your studio. And anytime you're back in Vegas, you're always welcome back here, man. So listen, if you just spent an hour and 15 minutes with us, which hopefully you did, I got to understand, dude. Your personal brand is so important to everything you do in life, and you have total control over it. Whether you choose to share your entire life every second on Twitter, every second on this, start a podcast, whatever it is, you got to start doing it now. See you next time. What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us for another episode of Escaping the Drift. Hope you got a bunch out of it, or at least as much as I did out of it. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the show, you can always go over to escapingthedrift.com. You can join our mailing list. But do me a favor, if you wouldn't mind, throw up that 5-star review, give us a share, do something, man. We're here for you. Hopefully you'll be here for us. But anyway, in the meantime, we will see you at the next episode.